Welcome to this 22nd episode of the Year in Review 2022. As promised in the first episode, we've done one episode each day for the last 22 days of the year, and we've covered a lot. So before we get into this 22nd video, let's look at some of the things that we've already covered. For instance, in the last episode, we spoke about 22 takeaways from Unleash with FTEM, a talk show that we host on fromtheexpertsmouth.com. In another episode, we spoke about 22 experiences shared by different authors whose backgrounds were very different and diverse from mine, but how their stories connected with each other, and that showed us how the 8 billion people on the planet are all much more united, much more similar than we normally give ourselves credit for. In another episode, we did one more than our standard fare of 22, since we have to welcome 23, right? So we welcome 23 with 23 startup jargons that help demystify and debunk a lot of the myths and the mystery around the startup world. Not because people are not aware of these basic concepts, but because these concepts are enshrined in jargon that makes it difficult for somebody outside that ecosystem to understand. And that has been the endeavor right through these 22 videos to ensure that things do add up. And speaking of adding up, 2 and 3 does add up to 5. So we did a series of 5 as well. In fact, as part of these 22 episodes, I introduced you to 5 of the frameworks or mental models that I have developed over the course of this year. The first one was around packs, essentially the packs that you need to help propel your career as you transition from the academia to the industry. So these are the packs which help you bridge these gaps. Not only that, you need to wrap your heads around the issues that you face during the course of your career, and that was the wrap model. The third model is much more universal in its appeal because it is something that impacts everybody, which is how do we go about managing our time. And if you heard that episode, you know that's not the right way to phrase it. It's not about how we manage our time, but it's about how we ensure that our time is well directed. Not only that, the fourth mental model that we created in that very episode was around building two corollaries to the very famous Parkinson's law. And last but not the least, ultimately we are doing all this so that we become prosperous, successful, and we are able to accumulate tons of money and wealth. So the fifth and final mental model that I introduced you to was the value-based framework around how you can change your situation from running after money to money chasing you. As part of this year in review series, I have only introduced you to the framework so that you get a taste and a feel of what is about to come. I will drill down much deeper into each one of these aspects in the coming year. And we didn't just stop at these 5 mental models or frameworks that I had developed. We had 5 takeaways from a lot of things going on around the world. For instance, the first episode itself was 5 takeaways from the World Cup, and the World Cup was still underway, and we had only reached the first knockout round of the World Cup at that point in time when we started this episode. It's been a long time since we've been doing one video each day in this series, hasn't it? We followed that up with another 5 takeaways from the subsequent knockout rounds of the World Cup. Complementing the world of sports was the world of travel, where I spoke about the 5 takeaways from my mother of all road trips, the 7,500 kilometer road trip that I did earlier during this year. And we also looked at what the world at large is doing, of course, through the lens of Google, where we looked at the 5 most searched terms of the year. And within that, one of the big themes that emerged was the Can I Change theme. And we looked at 5 dimensions of life that people wanted to change. And speaking of change, if there has been one big change during the last year, that has been the change in my coordinates. I transitioned from employment to being on my own. And this was driven largely by the desire to make a bigger impact, both in terms of the number of people that I could impact or the number of organizations that I could impact, and secondly also in terms of the kind of transformational impact that I could bring about being on my own and configuring my professional life the way I would want to. And if you've seen the intro, you already know what are those 4 dimensions or planks on which I am building my professional career now onward. In my first role as a business advisor, I help companies grow profitably and at scale while still conserving cash and capital. Given what has been going on in the startup ecosystem, you might even believe that this comes from fantasy land. But believe me, this is the only way to do business and the only way that I know from my experience, not in the least of 11 years as a CEO of a leading firm. I also wear the hats of an educator and an author. For instance, this year, I published a thoroughly revised edition of my book How to Stay Positive and Productive, which was first launched in March 2020 within days of the first lockdown being announced. And I got a lot of feedback from readers that this book could be a companion not just during the pandemic but beyond it. So, hopefully, as we are towards the tail end of the pandemic, I launched a thoroughly revised edition with postscripts at the end of each chapter and two brand new chapters so that the book becomes more relevant for the new normal as well and helps you stay positive and productive. Thirdly, in my role as speaker, I continue to speak on a wide variety of topics ranging all the way from technology, AI and ML, citizen development, cloud computing, to the world of careers, personal development, success, and last but not the least, talking a lot about business and startups. In fact, even today, on the last day of the year, I'm going to be sharing my thoughts on startups at a media platform. And fourthly, in my entrepreneurial capacity as co-founder of FromTheExpertsMouth.com, it has been heartening to see how the platform has grown from strength to strength just based on organic content and the power of shared experiences. We now help transform the lives and the mindsets of people across more than 160 countries. So these were the 5 sub-threads of the one big change that happened during the year. But since 2022 is about to end, it's time to go beyond and look at 2 and 3, 23. So let's do that with each of these elements, the 2 and the 3. If we look carefully, the 2 and 23 represents the decade of the 20s. So here are the two big themes that I would like to work on during this entire decade of the 20s. The first big theme is to enable people to share and to learn from the shared experiences of each other. As I demonstrated through a thought experiment in one of the earlier episodes, our stories, our experiences are much more similar, even though we may appear to come from very diverse backgrounds with different ideologies and different thought processes. The second big theme is to help people get transformational results through skill and capacity enhancements. These are the two big movements that I am going to be a part of over the course of the next decade. And I would love for you to join this movement in any capacity whatsoever, either as a contributor or as a beneficiary to any of the initiatives that I would be doing in my individual capacity or through our platform from theexpertsmouth.com. And moving on to the 3 in 23, which is this particular year, there are a few initiatives that I have planned which I would be focusing on at least in the first half of the next year. The first one of these is something that I have been speaking about for a long time, and a lot of us feel this pain. This is about bridging the gap between academia and industry, which I've spoken at length in my episode on PACS. PACS is not just a framework on a video or a PowerPoint presentation. There are many elements that I have identified within each of the PACS. That's personal development, application, career management, knowledge and skills, each one of which will take the form of either content or courses or a combination of the two so that you get the PACS that you need to be able to bridge the gap between academia and the industry, or to accelerate your career or your entrepreneurial ventures or whatever else it is that you may be interested in doing professionally. The second focus theme is more universal in nature because it impacts not just people professionally but across all dimensions of their life, and it impacts everybody. I am talking about the only resource which is distributed absolutely equally to all the people in the world. Yes, I am talking about how you can ensure that your time is well directed. This is particularly true in a VUCA world that is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Under all of these circumstances, time seems to be the only resource that is predictable, that is definitive, and it does not alter. As we are living in the information age and the age of disruptions, on the one hand, we find it extremely difficult to focus on the task at hand with our attention spans dwindling to the lowest ever in the history of mankind. And on the other hand, there is a massive potential to capitalize on the disruptive powers and forces that are unleashing in the business world and in society out there, with so many things on the cusp of transformation. So, as always, but particularly at this point in time in our history, it becomes extremely important to ensure that our time is well directed. And the third big theme for the coming year is around the advisory space, where I will continue to help businesses grow and scale profitably while still conserving cash and capital. I've interacted with a lot of entrepreneurs, founders, business organizations that would want to engage with me, but my capacity is finite. So while I will continue to restrict the number of people with whom I engage on a one-on-one basis, I will certainly look at opening the doors in terms of a one-to-many or a group interaction, either through courses or a mastermind group or a community or something of that sort. Needless to mention, all of these announcements will first be happening on this YouTube channel itself. So ensure that you subscribe to this channel right now so that you do not miss out on any of the content that I will be sharing across these three themes or those two macro themes that I spoke about earlier. And also do check out the playlist that contains all the 22 episodes of this Year in Review series. I've added the link in the description and it will also appear as a pop-up on this end screen right in front of you. And before you leave, do not forget to like this video and leave your comment behind on which are those elements of these 22 episodes and the themes that I spoke about which interests you the most, because the content that I'm creating is essentially for you and for your benefit and for your transformation. So I would love to channelize my energy and resources on creating things that you are more interested in. So with that, have a great year ahead. See you with many more insights in 2 and 3 23.